This is season number 19 of Bass Talk Live with Matt Pengrack. BTL is presented by Lowrance, Bass Cat Boats, Aptco, Strike King Lures, Sunline, Big Bite Baits, Spro, X-Zone Lures, Gamakatsu, The Bass Tank, Denali Rods, and Pro Guide Batteries. Hit them with the hook, Jeffries.
PTL coming at you.
Good morning and welcome to another exciting edition of BTL Bass Talk Live, where we are going to talk about bass fishing. It is a brand new week. It is January 16th. And I have to say, over the years, I've been responsible for putting together a lot of the BTL shows, particularly over the last 5 years. And every once in a while, you just have one that develops organically. And then you get a bonus thrown in, and it becomes even special. And you're like, well, there's no way, unless I mess something up on my end, that this isn't going to be a fantastic show. And we have that today. This show kind of came back up organically. I mentioned it last week. Ken Duke and Terry Battisti from Bass Fishing Archives dropped the Big Bass podcast that Ken teased for, I feel like it kind of came about. He's like, well, maybe I could do a podcast on this, on the Big Bass. And then he's like, I think I'm going to do it. And then he's like, I'm going to do it. And then he came on and he's like, January 3rd. Now there's like 4 or 5 episodes out. I had a spirited discussion with him over the first episode. So we're going to talk to Ken Duke about that. And then in the meantime, I talk to Charlie Hartley on a regular basis, because who doesn't need that type of positivity in their life on a daily? And he's in Florida. I think the streak is still intact. He's had some good weather down there, but he's been winning belts and trophies and big bass. And when Charlie Hartley says he has a couple stories that he'd like to share, well, by God, you let Charlie Hartley come in and share a couple stories. So Charlie Hartley, thank you for jumping on BTL this morning. How are you doing?
Happy New Year, Matt. Love the new studio, and it's been a great first. Can you believe it's the 16th of the year already? Happy New Year to all the fans. All the tournaments I've been fishing here local, people have come up to me at every tournament and said, when are you going to be on BTL again? And if I wouldn't keep hearing that, I wouldn't bug you. But obviously, some people listened, and it touches my heart when they say that. To be associated with BTL is really cool, Matt. Thank you.
Yes. I don't. Oh, we're getting a little bit of feedback in the audio there, but we're good. Okay, so a couple regulars that I think I'm going to have on this year. I didn't clear it with you or Ken. I'm assuming you guys are going to be okay with it. But we've got Matt Steffen, who's going to come on every quarter, because I love talking to Matt Steffen. I think he's got a great, different view on things. Not afraid to voice his opinion. Had that show, so he's going to be a regular guest. Obviously, Bradley Hallman, in between his journeys across the country as returning to the Elite Series in 2023. He's going to be a regular guest. We got Frank every Thursday, but the other two key components to this, because I don't have a full-time co-host now, obviously Charlie Hartley and none other than Ken Duke. And we're gonna tag team this deal. Mr. Duke, thank you for joining us, also from the Sunshine State.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. Hey, Matt, thanks for having me. Charlie, always a pleasure to see you, my brother. This is going to be fun.
It'll be a lot of fun. It's an awful nice place to live, isn't it, Ken? I noticed during your podcast that you are a true Floridian. You bleed sand, and it is it's probably the greatest nation or country in this state, in this nation. I apologize, but it could be a country. It is a very unique part of our country. It's the most tropical. It's the most southern point where bass can grow the largest. And those other states wouldn't have big bass without Florida bass, would they, Ken?
Thank you, Charlie, for pointing that out. The Florida bass, Micropterus salmoides floridanus, is the most important of the bass species in Florida. Hey, come on, make America Florida.
What'd you call it again?
I think the Florida bass is the most important of all the bass subspecies.
Oh, I thought you said some weird name for it.
I did. I used the Latin there because I want to.
Yeah.
I think we should do the show in Latin, Matt. Quite frankly,
I know pig Latin.
Micropterus salmoides, which is a largemouth bass, and then you throw floridanus on the end.
Floridanus, yes.
Largemouth bass.
When I was a kid, Ken, there were only 10-pound bass in Florida, and made my first trip down here at 16 years of age and slept in a pup tent. Kissimmee River Ranch because I read in the back of Bassmaster magazine that you could catch a 13-pound bass out of Lake Kissimmee. And to a kid from Ohio, that was worth driving 1,000 miles and sleeping in a pup tent from Christmas to New Year's. And never dreamed years later I'd own a place on the Kissimmee chain. I dreamed of it, but never thought it would happen. And every morning I go out there, I never take it for granted. Any cast, you can catch a double-digit fish. You see alligators, you see manatees, you see bald eagles, you see turkey, you see deer. It is absolute paradise. My friends get sick of me sending them pictures and just putting at the bottom, paradise. And now with SpaceX, I get to see space rockets take off from my driveway. How could the state get better?
I'm with you, Charlie. I had the good fortune of being born here in Florida, in Orlando, in fact, the area where I live now. And I've lived other places, but they're going to have to drag me out in a bag at this point.
How close are you guys together? Because I know like I said, Charlie's on the Kissimmee. You're closer to Orlando, Ken?
Well, I'm not far. I'm 40 minutes from Big Toho Marina.
Close.
Yeah, we're pretty close. Yeah,
we're gonna go fishing. I've got a couple secret lakes that Ken would even approve of, and maybe he can get me into some of those private lakes also. I can always provide a boat and a fishing pole, Ken.
Charlie will do it. I have access to some good places. I think he'll approve.
That's probably one of the other coolest things down here, Matt, is the tournament lakes are great, but they receive an incredible amount of pressure. And we have a bunch of really small lakes down dirt roads that not many people go to, and tournaments are never on them. And the fish are very naive. And after struggling through a tournament all week, it's really great to go to one of those ponds where the girls are not educated at all. And you catch them like every cast.
Charlie, is your streak still intact? I know. I think the last time we did an article or something, but it was over 800, I think, if my memory was right.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, right before Chesapeake Bay opened, I finally got COVID after dodging it for 2.5, 3 years. And it, even though I'd been vaccinated, it was as bad as I've ever felt. And the streak had to take a medical exemption for about 4 days. I did not leave my bedroom. And then I limped to Chesapeake and started it over again. So it kind of broke my heart to kill the streak. But it also, I was well over 1,200 days in a row catching a fish. And, but it really became a cumbersome responsibility. There were certain days where it was very difficult to squeeze that in, and it became almost a chore on some days. And I never want fishing to be a chore. But until the COVID deal, I really did keep it intact, even in the snowflakes, through ice, however I needed to. Even driving to other lakes, I would stop at a little roadside pond and catch a bluegill or something to keep the streak alive. But the funniest part about that streak is I can have a really bad day at work and 13, 14-hour day, and I walk down to that pond, I catch that first little fish, and I go, that's the best thing that's happened all day. You know, that's really what fishing is to me. Everything else in life, except for my lovely wife, Tracy, is something in the way of me catching another fish. So I, schedule everything early in the morning so I can get it over with so I can go fishing, because I just haven't got bored with catching fish. I really have. Never will get my fill of it. Never.
Matt, I think we got a new nickname for Charlie now. We got to call him Iron Man, just like we called Lou Gehrig. And
yeah, he's definitely the Cal Ripken. I had known I'd heard through the grapevine that you had COVID, but that we're obviously recovered. There you are, looking just as dapper and fine as ever. But my question was about that streak, but I didn't ask until now. So I mean, if you think about it, folks, if you're listening to this, like I'm thinking of my life, I like it's that there's just, you have to make a concerted effort. You're over 3 years, 365 days a year, half of which is in Ohio, fishing the Opens, fishing Toyota Series, running a very substantially sized business, taking care of other family responsibilities. You have holidays, you have weather days, you have all of that. And to go 1,200 days, show me someone Show me someone who
hey,
has a longer streak than that right now.
Check the Guinness Book of World Records. There's a gentleman in there that literally went thousands and thousands of days, and that's what. When I read that, I thought this guy's my hero. This is something I want. I mean, I never even thought of that. I do have a giant map up in my office, full size, the whole wall, that has every body of water in North America on it. And I put a push pin in every body of water I've ever been in, which was, again, an idea I saw from one of my peers. And I thought, man, someday I want a wall full of thumbtacks. And when I take kids in that office now, they look up there like I did when I was a kid. Like, how could you possibly have gone to all those places? And the funny part is, with all our tournaments, I've been to most of them hundreds of days. I've spent hundreds of days on most of the best bass venues in North America. I'm blessed, very blessed.
It's funny.
I wanted to talk about the upcoming open schedule, Matt. I want to call you out a little bit too this year.
What?
Yeah,
you have to call me out. But no, it's funny you mentioned that with the map. So when I got into this house last year, this is actually the room that the studio's in, was whoever lived in it before was their office. Well, when they emptied out everything, like I went in the garage and there were like 19 coolers, and I think they did like chicken on a stick at the state fair, like that type of stuff. So they traveled a lot. Well, on the back of the door was a map like that, and there were pins all over the mid. And I was, what is that? Maybe that's where no, it's everywhere. They sold chicken on a stick over the last 5 years.
Which is similar to tournament fishing, very similar.
Yeah. What do you want to call me out on?
Carnival life is similar to tournament bass.
Probably more lucrative. What did you want to talk about the EQs on? Did you get the email where we've got our own logo now and all that, Charlie? We're getting email updates every Thursday from Hank. Ken's gonna just bite his tongue here for a minute while we discuss the lucrative Bassmaster Opens.
He's got input. I heard him arguing earlier in the year with you about how many out of the 175 will complete the season. And Ken, I understand your skepticism, but last year a real large proportion of them completed, which surprised me. Normally by the last Opens, you're correct, a bunch of people drop out. I'll take Matt's over against your under on how many fish all 9. But we'll see. It's going to be the most exciting year ever in the Opens. This EQ thing took off like a rocket. Bassmasters has done a great job promoting this. FLW kind of stepped on some toes, canceling the tour. So we inherited a lot of those guys. I'm waiting for you to have a show with Ish on it and a couple of the guys that have walked away and are going to come back to try to requalify. I'd love their input. But the writing's on the wall. It's great that there's 2 circuits, but why are some of the biggest names trying to return back to Bassmasters? It's absolutely, it's fun to watch. We live in very interesting times. Back in the day, I don't remember, a lot of us, including myself, fished FLW Tour and the Tour, Bassmasters Tour at the same time. It was not that impossible. Before the elites, the entry fees were manageable. It didn't conflict. A lot of them actually worked where it worked out, where you went from one tournament to the next. But the line has been drawn in the sand, as we can see. And now, of course, we're going to have a 5-fish limit in Major League Fishing. Imagine that. But that's not what I wanted to talk about. I wanted to talk about our upcoming schedule, because the first tournament of the year is at the right time of the year. And if you guys are ever bored, get on Google Bassmasters TV shows 2003 Lake Eufaula. Edwin Evers won his first national event by beating Charlie Hartley in second place on March 1st, 2003. And the top 6 was made up of a headliner top 6. We had Edwin Evers, Mark Menendez, Mike Reynolds, Tommy Biffle, Peter T., and Charlie Hartley. And it was an incredible tournament. I hope we have similar conditions. The year before that, I had fished an open down there with a buddy, and we had similar conditions. And when Tracy and I pulled in there for the first 3 official practice days, I looked at that lake and I said, honey, we're going to be in good shape. And it was the only time I ever came off practice early, and it confused her. She goes, what are you doing here? I said, well, you said you wanted to go bowling. I'm never showing you any time, And she goes, you get back out there. I go, we're okay. She goes, you show me. And she made me take her out there and catch one on the first cast. She said, you're okay. Let's go balling.
What year was this, Charlie?
2003. And wait till you see the video. Tommy Sanders looks young, and Denny Brower is the guest host, and Denny Brower looks young. Tommy Biffle even looks young in the video. You got to see it. I can't believe 2003, it was a lot of years ago, but it's amazing when you see how much we've aged in that. When you see someone every day, you don't see the aging. When you don't see, someone for 10 years, it's like, whoa, we got old quick. How'd this go so fast?
Charlie, I think you and Edwin have aged almost not at all. You guys still have that same enthusiasm and fire for the sport. It's outrageous. And you mentioned that was Edwin's first big win on the tour. And of course it was. And that sort of lit a fire under him. He was winning one a year basically for a long time after that. And one of the all-time great champions on the BASS side before he went over to MLF, and he's done obviously super well over there as well. But yeah, you guys, I think you guys have not aged hardly at all.
Matt,
Right.
Incredible how quickly you can pull that up these days and put that in front of us. Thank you. I gave you no warning about that at all, and
No.
you certainly had a chance to. And that's amazing you can do that. The new studio's been going great.
Yeah. All right. Be quiet just for a second here. We'll see if this will work, but I need to, I'm going to bring it back in because I want to see what you say on this. Cause I know you're probably pumped because that is a fish that we just showed and it came off in midair and it looked like it was up in it looked like it was a sketchy fish. So, hold on. Let me see if I can share the audio here.
You're stroking my ego. Feel free.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
But I think if we talk, it's going to provide echoing. So we'll see what we got.
And Charlie has caught a fish on the right side all around in that pocket and fishing up on those flats.
Over to Charlie Hartley, self-professed neat freak, one of the all-time top 10, I think, has a black boat. A black car, says he buys black because it gets dirtier quicker. He can clean them quicker.
And Charlie has caught a fish on the right side of the boat, which is kind of unusual because his special spot is to his left. He's throwing in that one spot over and over again.
That fish just touches. We're putting in live well. It's the first one to go home.
What a great race we have going on here. Edwin Evers in the lead right now, but only barely. Charlie Hartley right behind him there. When we come back, we'll get last year's champ in the studio again.
All right, there we go. That's good stuff, Charlie.
Cool.
That's really
Very
good
cool.
stuff.
The memories were unreal. That was the first time I learned to never think you won one, because when I was heading in, I was telling myself I'd won the tournament. And nothing's worse than thinking you had it done and it didn't. Especially, they weighed us in order because they knew back then who was going to win. And my contemporaries didn't even have limits, and I had a limit and a big one. And it's looking good. We're down to 4 or 5 guys weighed in, can't even fill their limit. And I'm like, I've done it, man. I've really done it. Another funny story about that, and I didn't mean to get way off track, but
This is not off track.
You had Rick Pierce on the other day about always checking the boats that they gave you for the final day. Well, they put us in their boats the final day, and sure enough, when I went to run in, that motor wouldn't start, and the camera boat was just about out of sight, and we started screaming, and the camera boat turned around, and we moved everything into the camera boat, and I went running in, and I got about halfway in, just my head spinning from all that happening, and I'd run it down to the last minute, and I looked at my marshal, and I said, oh, my God, did I grab my fish? I remembered grabbing everything but the fish. He goes, they're right in that well. I go, thank God, and we headed in. And it was a great tournament. I think the first day I had 21.5, and I was in like 12th place. That's how good the fishing was up shallow. And Edwin had 73 pounds. I think I had 70 pounds. It was a great tournament. You should be very excited, Matt, to be going to Eufaula that time of the year. If it's up and muddy, it can be a lot of fun. It really can.
Well, we get a little bit of feedback, and then it kind of we got to get a pair of headphones for you next time, Charlie. I keep.
I'm sorry, I'm not as
That's
high
not.
tech.
It's not your fault. There's literally like a little port. You just plug it in, and then it just goes in your ears. But I think that'll take the little 2 seconds. But then it settles down. Interesting question for Ken Duke. Historian, typically averages what it takes. You have history over every tournament, winning weights, averages to top 10. All that stuff. There's been a lot of talk, and I don't even want to talk about it on the show, but there's been a lot of talk. Technology is advancing. There's more and more at the angler's fingertips. I believe Jacob Wheeler just came out with an article on Major League Fishing where he said, hey, if there's anything that this technology has taught us is that the seasonal patterns and the way the fish live and where they live and what we thought they did at certain times of the year is total BS, and we're just scratching the surface and we have no idea what they do. That's a very truncated version of what it was. But is there enough data over the last couple years, like our tournament results from the same time of the year in the early 2000s and the mid 2000s and the 90s, even applicable now in 2023, or if it took 11.5 or 12 pounds to be in the top 10 for 20 years, is it now going to be leaps and bounds more because of the education of the angler? And I understand fisheries change some, but what are your thoughts on that? Is the history still applicable to today for a guy like me and Charlie who's going in trying to figure out how to top 10 Eufaula?
I think that's a really tough question to answer for a couple of reasons. One, forward-facing sonar and all that has not been around long enough to give us a significant database to show if it's really impacting tournament weights. Bass fishing has so many variables. We've got the weather. A tournament right after a cold front is not going to be as productive as a tournament with a nice warming trend coming in the spring, especially. We've got the up and down cycles of the fisheries, and no fishery. And I haven't done a study on it, but in my opinion, off the top of my head, no fishery has been more up and down than Eufaula. For example, there was a tournament on Eufaula in the mid 90s where the average fish for the winner was over 5 pounds. Okay. And then there was a tournament a few years earlier where the average fish for the winner was under 2 pounds. Eufaula is wildly cyclical. You have so many variables, it's hard to say what forward-facing sonar is really doing to the weights. The other thing I will say is I'm already hearing from guys, and you guys can either support this or tell me it's not true, that they're noticing that bass are aware of the forward-facing sonar, and that when you hit them with that beam, they are scattering on some of the higher pressured waters. So forward-facing sonar may not always have the same impact that we see it having today.
Yep. My 2 cents worth is fishing has become better, period, than when I was a young man. Fishermen have become better. Catch and release was a brand new idea when I was young. They thought you were crazy when you threw a fish back. We're seeing the benefits of that. We're seeing better fish management, better scientific theory on fish management than ever. We have a warming trend. I'm not going to call it global warming, but we have more grass, more clear water. We have more bass and bigger weigh-ins in the last decade than we did the previous decade. I remember when a 20-pound bag was big. Now it's a 30 or 40-pound bag. When I first started fishing the invitationals, Woo Daves told me, and he was correct for years, you weigh a limit every day and you'll go to the Classic. That's all it used to take. That's all it still takes. That's all it still takes. I don't think so.
Nobody who's caught a limit every day for a season has ever missed the Bassmaster Classic.
Then I'm glad that's still intact, because that was when Woo Daves told me that. I'm like, well, I'm going to the Classic all the time.
But I'll say this. Only a handful of guys have caught a limit every day for a season. It doesn't happen every year. Occasionally when the season is, when the schedule is kind of, let's call it easy. There's no Ohio River. There's no Sabine River. There's no Table Rock. Then you might have 2 or 3 guys catch a fish, limit out every day of a season. But otherwise, it's very rare for guys to limit every day for a season. And if you do, book your ticket.
Charlie, I'll say this, that first year in 2020, I believe my goal when I finished 6th in the opens overall, my goal in the 8 events was 5 fish a day. And based on conversation I had with Ken and research, I said, if I catch 5 fish a day, it doesn't matter what size they are in comparison, because that year, it would have worked. I came 4 fish short. I had 5 fish. I had 3 fish one day at Oneida, so there's 2 fish, and then I had 1 fish one day at Smith, so that's 4. I was 6 fish short over the 18 days that I fished. I never made a top 10.
Yep, and similar to what happened to me 2 years after I failed to requalify for the elites. I finished 6th in the points, and they took 5 up, and the last one was a grand. And the last day I failed to weigh a limit. I weighed 4 fish.
But if you had a limit, you would have made it.
I know.
And if I had a limit those days, I would have made it.
Well, when I'm talking about a fish every day of competition, I'm talking about in the elite series.
Right.
Or back in the day of the tour or the top 150s, all that. But yeah, in the opens, obviously it can be more challenging because there are fewer days. You know how it is. You can afford to have a bad day in an open, but it has to be day 3.
That's right.
Yeah.
You don't have to make a lot of day 3s. I mean, you have to make a lot of day 3s, but you don't have to catch any at day 3. Matt, you're too young to realize this, but when I first started fishing the invitationals, they were like $600, I think, and they were not even full. There were not even waiting lists for the invitationals, which were at the time the highest level of Bassmasters. I think there was an Eastern and a Western invitational before they started the tour or the BP series. But it's amazing what this sport has done. And like I hear a lot of people complain and bitch, it's awful good right now, guys. I'm telling you right now, there's more people fishing, more people running around in bass boats, more kids fishing, more tournaments. I'm not saying the payout's great, but that's not why most people are into bass fishing. Only a handful make their living at it, their true living at it. But it's a really cool time. And this is going to be an exciting year, super exciting year for bass fishing.
I agree. All right. We're going to take our first break of the show. And then when we come back, we're going to, I want to get, Charlie's got some stories. He's been beat out for big bass, and I can tell he's salty about it, but he's such a positive guy that he's like, oh, good for him. He caught an 8-pounder. And when Charlie had a 7, but I know deep down, he's like, that son of a gun. Why didn't it come off of his Cinco? He's like, out here, I'm Carolina rigging 18-pound limits. I'm out here for the, so we'll talk about that. Then I want to get into your Big Bass podcast, Ken Duke, hardcore listeners. And I've talked to a lot of people about the podcast, and they're like, it's such a small niche. I totally disagree. I think you have an absolute monster on your hands, and I don't think you understand how big this could be, because it's quirky enough, and the knowledge base, information, your co-host, the way it's quirky enough and interesting enough that I think it's one of those things that once people listen to it, it draws them into episodes, the rest of the episodes. Like, I'm getting you now. It's going to be very difficult to get you on the show in like 2-3 years because of how big this is going to get, Ken.
When have I ever turned you down to be on BTL?
I know. It's just you're always so complimentary of me and everyone you're around. When we get the chance to return the favor, I like to maybe go a little bit overboard on it.
Much appreciated.
All right. It is BTL on a Monday, kicking off the new week from the new studio in Shawnee, Oklahoma, with a couple of Florida guys. Charlie Hartley, Ken Duke. We'll be back right after this.
Introducing HDS Pro. Watch fish reacting to your lure live with Active Target 2. Get game-changing clarity in the megahertz range with the new Active Imaging HD sonar. Find the richest fishing spots with C-Maps charts. Take full control of your boat with the ultimate fishing system. HDS Pro. The more you see, the more you catch.
The new Puma STS has been redesigned from the ground up. With the angler, design, function, and performance in mind, nothing on this new offering was compromised, and the only thing carried over from the previous version is the name. Based on the Soft Touch series hull that started with the flagship Jaguar, this new model is nimble and performs incredibly well at all speeds with either a 250 or 300 horsepower engine. Featuring a new 96-inch wide-body footprint, this hull measures out at 20 foot 7 inches in length. Industry-leading design coupled with tournament-winning performance. The Puma STS from Basscat. Feel the rush.
Everything you need, one legendary brand. Taiwan Strike King.
Hey guys, Gerald Swindle representing the AFCO Hydronaut. This is the jacket I love wearing when times is tough, and I'm talking about the weather, not the fishing. The jacket, what I like, I got a double cup right here. I can seal up the bottom of my jacket because when you're fishing, you're holding your arms up. You're bad about getting water, it runs downhill. Everything bends good. I'm long arm. Look, it fits very comfortable. My arms is flexible. I've got the speed hood on, pouring down rain. I can get everything zipped up. One thing they did is they made plenty of pocket space. If you ain't got enough pockets in the Hydronaut rain suit, you just got too much stuff. From the water membrane, that's 30K, baby. 30 times the reason you ain't gonna get wet. Super warm. If it's cold in the wintertime, you put on your Hydronaut, you're gonna be a much more comfortable person. If you don't want to just look sexy at Dairy Queen, wear your Hydronaut. We got it from small to 5X. Most rain gear does not come in that many sizes. You got waist adjusting straps. We can make it fit you. No matter what the environment is, we want you to be comfortable. We want you to be dry. You gotta check it out. It ain't gonna let you down.
Elite Series Pro Daryl Gleason here. My Pro Guide batteries keep me going on those long tournament days and long practice days. Always plenty of juice, never fail. The best part about Pro Guide batteries, it's the people behind the company. They have over 40 years experience in the battery business, keeping all of us fishermen out on the water longer, catching more fish. Check them out at ProGuideBatteries.com.
What's up, Bass Talk Live fans? Brandon Polnick here. And ever since I won a couple Bassmaster Elite Series events on X-Zone Lures, I've been getting a bunch of questions of what makes them so special and different. And really, the truth is, it's in the details. The little details, things like no cheap fillers in their plastic. That gives you more lifelike action, more realistic and vibrant colors. But don't just take my word for it. Go to www.xzonelures.com and check them out for yourself.
Welcome back, BTL, on a Monday. Ken Duke, Charlie Hartley, and I don't think headphones would work for Charlie Hartley. If you watch him during the commercials and even during the show, we've done thousands of these shows, folks, and I've never seen anyone that paces with such determination and consistency. We can't tether him to some headphones. We might have to get some iPods for Charlie Hartley.
Yeah, when I did Bass University, the guy with the camera cussed me all day because he couldn't follow me up and down that stage with the camera.
Hey, nothing wrong with that. Yes, Ken.
I was going to say, Matt, if Charlie were in another sport, they would say he's got a great motor.
Charlie does have a great motor. Charlie does have a great motor. Hey, I also want to mention before we get back into it, Omnia Fishing, new sponsor for BTL moving forward in 2023. And I'm also been trying to learn the art of the not talk through, the art of it's instead of playing an ad, you incorporate it into the show, right? As part of the a read through. That's the word I was working with. So you've got some of these new kind of progressive companies. Some of them, hey, I want to see my ad on there, talk about it. So we're working on the art of the read through. One of the things I was on this morning, still trying to get familiar with that website. It does like a bunch of lake breakdowns. You could have like individual shoppers, bunch of cool stuff. Omnia making a big push into the southern bass market, well known up Wisconsin, Minnesota, that type of region. But was on the bargain bin stuff today. Tons of Strike King stuff, tons of that, really good deals on that. So if you need some square bills, some plastics, some rage tail craws and the like, just go ahead and check out Omnia Fishing. Take like a little bit, like I'd get on it like on a PC and kind of familiarize yourself with it. Because, you guys are probably the same way. Like you go to the same websites, you expect the same thing time and time. And then when something new comes, regardless of how new it is, it's probably like getting people to listen to a new podcast, Ken. It takes a minute to get familiar with it. And then you learn the advantages of it. Fair assessment. How was that for a read through?
I'm going to hope a little. I heard him. Go ahead, Ken. I'm sorry.
I was just saying, Matt, you're smooth like butter.
Smooth like butter. I saw them when they were on your show. I think it's pretty cool, the things they're offering. And I think if you sign up for membership or something, you get $25 or $35 right away, put towards your first order or something.
Yeah, no, I don't know if that's still a thing. That might have been a thing at the end of the year, so I have to probably I have to probably take it to it. All right, let's go. Let's go big bass story, Charlie Hartley, and then let's go big bass podcast, Ken Duke, and see how smooth we can make that transition, because I feel like it's seamless.
Good. So far, so good. I thought we were going to run out of things to talk about. And
No.
First one I got down here, and Ken Duke mentioned it in his last appearance or two. I was honored to be a boat captain at the Bobby Lane Cup, which is just an incredible event. I have a youth club at home myself, middle school and high school, but I'm always on the road, and I hardly ever get to participate other than sending them a check and getting all the accolades. Those advisors deserve all the credit, but I'm always available for Bobby Lanes when I get down here. I make sure I get down here in time, and he's always got me two really cool kids to fish with. Usually I always get the ones whose fathers don't fish. Their fathers don't have a boat. And I get to play dad, and I just love doing that. Whenever I volunteer, I cringe as it comes up, but at the end of the day, my sails are so full, I can't wait to do it again. I was honored to have two young men. By the way, Forrest Wood used to say these youth fishermen always have their pants pulled up and their hats on straight. They're not all tattooed up, and they're not all pierced in their face. They're good young kids like we were that love to fish, and they had never been in a tournament before, not just a Bobby Lane tournament. They'd never fished a tournament before. The rod and reel they brought into the boat were not functional, perfect for me. And with a little guidance, we ended up doing really good. They got to upgrade a couple of times, and I think they finished in the top 10. And I was so excited for them. I had been down there a week before and caught a bunch of fish, and I was hoping they'd hold steady. And those kids didn't know anything, and I had to talk it through them. I gave them that little bait that little trick I showed you at the pond, Matt, and those kids couldn't go wrong. They had a ball, and I love how they support each other. They don't get competitive yet at that age. They don't say, I caught more than you, you caught more than me. And then I got to see Lurch was there emceeing it again. Lurch is a really special person. And I got to see Jared Littner was there with his kid as a boat captain, which I really get along well with him. And then probably the highlight of that day was watching Bobby Lane stand on the end of the dock as we all motored out as a proud parent. I mean, he looked like the proud Bobby Lane. You should be so proud. I mean, that was to put all that on and to get to stand there and watch us all head out. And have your name on it. Heck, last year, the kids I had Lane jerseys on. I said, Bobby, these kids have your jerseys on. How cool is that? But after that, I started fishing my regular Wednesday morning tournaments. When we get daylight savings times down here, we'll have some evening tournaments too. I fish a Sunday afternoon tournament for after church. And I just fished the second Bass and Badges, which is a really cool tournament. All the police and sheriff and firemen are there with pavilions set up for the kids, and the kids get little firemen's hats and a hat, and I got a sheriff badge because I came in the top 3. And it benefits the Osceola Anglers, which is a youth club down here that I've been involved with, really good youth club. It's amazing the unselfishness of those parents to donate their time like they do to these clubs, because it is time consuming. One suggestion I'll make for youth tournaments, though, and I've been trying to push this, until they get older, it shouldn't be 8 hours. It should be 4 hours or something, because bless their hearts, at that age, that is a long time to stay focused and not hate fishing by the end of the day. It's okay if you're with Charlie Hartley. I can entertain you for 8 hours, but a lot of guys, after a few hours, you want to go in and play with your phone or your skateboard, but it's a pleasure. Anyway, that badge and Bass and Badge tournament is a really nice event, and we came in third. I got to fish with my good buddy Terry Seagraves that I partner up with a lot when I'm down here. Terry went to a classic, and we were contemporaries way back in the day. I actually was friends with Terry before I even knew Tracy. So that goes back a long ways. And we're still great friends, and he's young, but unbelievably spry still. So much honor to fish with him. We have a lot of fun in the boat. We both cut up all day. People can't tell if we love each other or hate each other. We cut up all day long.
Hey, Charlie, can't remember. Was that on the show or was that when I was staying there at the open for your house when you were talking about the first dates with Tracy and that stuff? Those were some awesome stories.
I am blessed. The two biggest blessings in my life have been bass fishing and Tracy Hartley. And I'm going to get choked up. I'm that hokey about it, but
there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, I know. I love my wife. She puts up with this,
Yeah. But dude, I'm going to call you out. I mean, I'm not going to call you out, but the best story, I'll let you tell it if you want to, but I'll just say the best story is when they kind of, Ken, I don't know if you've heard this. They kind of had a come to Jesus meeting about Charlie fishing tournaments and the acceptance and working back and forth. Do you remember that story? As to there might have been like an instance where she was like, you're not fishing tournaments. And then you went out and like physically couldn't go fish the tournament. That might be the greatest story I've ever heard in my life, Charlie.
Every passionate bass fisherman has gone through that when they involve a partner in their life. And as I always tell her now, and she laughs, and you guys are welcome to use this line, don't be jealous of a fish. When it comes to people, you're my favorite people. I just prefer fish. And, you can't compete with a different animal. But I think Matt's talking about when we first got married, I didn't show up for a couple of my evening tournaments, and my buddies called immediately. Where are you? Are your legs broken? Are you dead? We're worried about you. Well, my wife doesn't think it'd be such a good idea after working all day that I go fishing all night, little time for her. And they said, did you hear what you just said? They said, are we going to have to come over there and smack some sense? I said, I'll be there tomorrow night. I just heard what I just said. Well, I went that night, and of course the phone rang. I ignored it for a little bit, but it was new in the marriage, so I couldn't ignore it all night. I finally picked it up, and she explained to me I needed to get home, and I loaded the boat early and went home. Well, that was the last time I did that. We came to an understanding. You know what? If I have to choose between these two,
that's your two passions in life, Charlie.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Well, let's switch to our real famous person here, Ken Duke. And I want to bring up two things with you, Ken. One, Mr. Batista, if I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Terry Batista. I've got two partners, Batista, guys, on the podcast. Yep. Terry and I are in front of the camera. Basically, we're sort of the host of the show. And our other partner, Nathan Benson, who I worked with at BASS for many years. Nathan is the brains behind the operation. He makes sure you can hear us, see us, and that the thing gets out there.
Listening to him talk about the records getting broken in California while he was living it is so neat. And what these young kids don't understand, he'd talk about these records getting in the paper. We didn't have internet. So that paper was your brand. I mean, when you caught a big fish, even in Ohio, or if we won a little tournament in Ohio, there was a little section in the back of the sports page, one column on fishing. They'd list a couple tournament results or about a sports show or something like that. I found my first tournament because someone put an index card up on the Woolworth Woolco tackle department, because we didn't have tackle stores back then, saying at 5:30 Tuesday night there'll be a tournament. And I talked to my mom into taking us there. The internet has changed all of what you do, Ken, and the way you have to go back and find these archives, it's probably fun for you. I can tell you get excited when you do it. But I also wanted to bring up two things on your Big Bass podcast. One, we are living in super interesting times, a 10-pound Great Lakes smallmouth, and we've got OHIV going off right now with 60-pound 5-fish limits. These are unheard of things. I just want to give you my 2 cents worth on the 10-pound Lake Erie fish and see what you think, because I respect your opinion. My opinion is that is a freak of nature. Otherwise, we would see a year class slowly getting to that size. And I fish tournament after tournament at Lake Erie. I catch smallmouth after smallmouth at Lake Erie. I was blessed to be on the water the day that 10-pounder was caught. I was within 5 miles of it. My phone started lighting up. I thought, God, why couldn't I have caught that fish? Can you imagine what that would do for your career to catch a 10-pound Great Lakes?
Wait a second. So, BTO. So we had Charlie Hartley and and Frank Scalish within 5 miles of that fish, both on Lake Erie when it was caught.
It's not coincidence. The weather lined up for that day for there to be a record caught. We were there because we watched the weather pattern. Mr. Clapper came up to me that day. We were all out there. It was the stars were lining up. It's kind of like trophy deer hunting. The late year up there, we clobber them. I mean, they group up so bad, it can be 100 fish days with 80 over 4 pounds. I'm not exaggerating, but we do not see 7 pounders. We might see a 6. A 6 is a rare bird. I go to weigh-in after weigh-in at Lake Erie, Lake St. Clair, 7 pounders, like a unicorn.
How many of them are there, Ken? How many of them are there out there? How many 8s, 7s, 8s, 9s? Like, I mean, is there great record keeping? Is how many of those 8-pound smallmouth come out of the Great Lakes?
No, there's not great record keeping about that, Matt. What you find out when you dig into these records, like I have for decades, because it fascinates me, is that that once the peak is established, and let's say, for example, out at Erie, now that peak is 10 pounds, people stop reporting a lot of the 6s, 7s, and 8s because they know it's not a record. The other thing I think that's important to remember, and I've talked to a lot of biologists about this, is there's a pyramid of bass size out there. Now at the top may be the 10-pounder, but for there to be one 10-pounder, there's probably got to be 4, 5, 10, 9-pounders. There's got to be 30, 40, 50, 8-pounders, and just an ocean of 5, 6s, and 7s to get one to break through and reach 10. So there are obviously going to be some more giant fish out there, but how many of them are going to get caught? That's impossible to say. Now, what's interesting is that's way further north than anybody's ever certified a 10-pound smallmouth bass. You know, most of the 10-pound smallmouth bass, I mean way more than half of the certified 10-pound smallmouth bass have come from Dale Hollow Lake on the Tennessee-Kentucky border, including the current world record caught by David Hayes in 1955 at a remarkable and perhaps never to be broken 11 pounds, 15 ounces.
Hey, what is
all caught in Florida, according to your podcast?
Well, yeah, that's right. Yeah, everybody's got to go back and check out our Walter Hardin episode on the Big Bass Podcast, where you can read all about the 13 and 14-pound smallmouths that came from Florida back in the 1930s.
The only reason I think we have a chance at another one is she made babies. That 10-pounder made babies, and whatever genetic freak was in her DNA got passed on. Now, just like in the Guinness Book of World Records, we'll go back. There's a man every once in a while grows to 8 feet, but it's not because his mom and dad were 8 feet. It's a genetic mistake, and at least maybe she passed some of those on. I think it was a hormone imbalance or something to that effect for a fish to get that much larger than its brothers and sisters. I just don't see how else it could happen.
Yeah, I'm not a biologist, obviously not a geneticist. Yeah, there has to be some sort of outlier, some sort of breakthrough, some sort of reason for that fish to reach that. But there are 3 things you got to have to grow a big fish, whether it's a 10-pound smallmouth or even a 6 or 7-pound smallmouth. You got to have the right genetics, you got to have the right habitat, and you got to have enough food. And the right food, the high protein food, maybe, which is the gobies or something like that. So maybe this goby era is helping drive some of that. They obviously have good genetics. Lately, they've had great habitat out there. As long as there's not a pollution issue and things like that, perhaps Erie can produce for a long time. What you see in Texas with the ShareLunker stuff is, let's not forget, guys, ShareLunker might be nice, but ShareLunker is a marketing program. It is not a trophy bass raising program. When ShareLunker said, oh, we're going to produce a new world record largemouth bass within 5 years, which they said about 1990, they have not grown the state record by 1 ounce since that time. ShareLunker is very, very shaky as far as producing world-class bass fishing. Very, very shaky.
An experiment, as you say. It's an experiment.
But it's not. It hasn't even really been an experiment until reasonably recently when they started working more with the genetics. But what happens in Texas is what happens in a lot of places. Right now, OHIV is smoking hot. But if you look back at the duration of ShareLunker, which started in the 1980s, what would happen is one lake would get on fire and it would produce 4, 5, 6 ShareLunker fish, which have to be at least 13 pounds. And then it would go dark. And I mean, it would not produce another 13-pound fish for a decade or more. So that those genetics were not working out. What it is, and we go back to what we were talking about at the top of the show, guys. What it is Micropterus selmoides floridanus, the Florida largemouth bass. You introduce the Florida largemouth bass into a fishery, 12 to 15, 18 years later, it is going to go crazy. It is going to break every state record. But then what happens is those pure Florida bass are no longer getting lucky enough to breed with other pure Florida largemouth bass, and you deplete the genetic material. And these fish become F2s, F3s, F4s, and the size of the bass levels out.
Similar to what happened to Chickamauga.
It happens everywhere you put these fish. Now,
Yep.
can you cause it to respike by introducing more pure Floridas? Probably. It's what happened in California. It's what happened in Mississippi, in Texas, in Arizona, in every state that has introduced Florida largemouth bass. That's what happens. And I've had biologists tell me recently, guys who know what they're doing and who are making a concerted effort to grow the largest bass in the world, have told me that there is no bass over, say, 18 pounds that is not a pure Florida largemouth bass.
Very interesting.
That's end of my Florida rant.
Super interesting, though. I loved hearing about the, as you called it, barrel biology. When I was a kid, I wrote many English and reports on fishing and read in the old encyclopedias about guys dumping barrels of fish out of trains when they crossed rivers. And that's how the bass got out west, which is just amazing that there were passionate enough people that thought, I need this fish west of the Mississippi. I mean, unbelievable they would go to that extreme. Even the guy trying to bring smallmouth down to Florida or vice versa. Amazing that it was just passionate fishermen that started distributing Florida strain around. Unbelievable.
Well, not just passionate fishing, not just passionate anglers, but back in the 1860s and 70s, the U.S. Fish Commission had a guy leading it called Spencer Fullerton Baird. And this is the guy who deserves a lot more credit for the spread of bass in the country than anybody else, because he was the guy having his department load fish into giant barrels and dumping them anywhere. And not just bass, but other kinds of fish too. And they were dumping them anywhere. And a lot of times these fish were dying within minutes, but sometimes they took hold. And Spencer Fullerton Baird is the Johnny Appleseed.
You took the words out of
the
my
bass.
mouth. Yeah, Johnny Appleseed.
All right, I'm going to bring this up. I didn't know if I was going to bring it up on this show, but I have a lot of drive time and a lot of ideas that go through my head. It's a blessing and a curse that I learned from Mark Jeffries, who is always trying to come up with the new thing. But I knew I was going to have you guys on the show. I know Charlie appreciates history. I know Ken Duke, you are the reason why we appreciate the history, because a lot of the history that we know about is because of you. We're talking about these people's names. Honestly, I would go my entire life full-time in this industry, never know any of this stuff, because there's one passionate person who knows about it. Here's my question. Let me see if I can word this right. Why is this important? How much does the average person who likes bass fishing need to know about this? How important is it for the preservation of the sport, for the kids in Hartley's Hogs, for the kids at Bobby Lane's tournament, for me in the Opens, for a college kid to have an understanding just of how we reach where we are now, both big bass tournaments, the guys who started the tournaments, and the whole thing? To me, I'll just let you answer that question. How important is it? And why is there not a small course that you could do just in 3 days that would put things into perspective, for people so they know what they're getting into and how this thing all came about? Is that even important?
Well, I think that stuff is important, and I love the question, Matt. I'll say it's important for several reasons. One, there's an old saying about history, and that is that if you don't know history, you're doomed to repeat it. So if you have a little understanding of the history of how our sport has worked, how even fishing techniques, how they've come about, then you have a better understanding of how it all came together. You have a better chance of taking it that next step and advancing it. You're gonna be ahead of your peers because of that understanding. You're gonna catch more fish because of that understanding. You're gonna know where it applies. You're gonna know where other guys have failed, so you won't have to go down that path toward failure. On the historical level, I think it was so frustrating for me for a particular company I worked for some years ago, to watch when they did not learn from what should have been their own institutional knowledge. They would try something, and I would say, well, they did this 14 years ago. It didn't work. Here's why it didn't work. Here's why this won't work this time. But it falls on deaf ears because they lacked the institutional knowledge or the understanding of why it had bombed. That was very frustrating. When it's great to learn from your own mistakes, but it's a hell of a lot better if you can learn from other people's mistakes. You're going to save yourself a whole lot of problems if you can learn from other people's mistakes. But if people aren't willing to do that, then they're doomed, and they're doomed to repeat history. I think that the history of the sport, and it's usually overlooked, but I think the history of the sport gives us a whole new perspective on it. It's an interesting perspective, and it can give you a whole other level of passion. Charlie loves the history of the sport. There are a lot of bass pros who really enjoy the history of the sport. We mentioned him earlier. Edwin Evers knows his stuff on the history of the sport. Charlie Hartley knows his stuff on Bernie Schultz. My God, Bernie really is a world-class expert on antique tackle. And I think these guys have a better understanding of our sport than the people who don't. And Matt, when you say you wouldn't have heard a lot of these names and so forth, I get it because you're blazing your own trail. In a sense, you're like me. I didn't have a parent who enjoyed fishing. I kind of learned it and picked it all up myself. But if you dig into the history a little bit, it's just another area to jump in and find passion in our sport. And the older you get, at least in my case, the more I appreciate the history because I've seen some of it. I was witness to some of it, like Charlie and Frank Scalish being on the water when the 10-pounder was caught out of Erie. At this point in my life, I've gotten to see, like, for example, I was there that day on day one of the 2008 Bassmaster Classic when Charlie Hartley led as a rookie the first day of his first Bassmaster Classic. That was a hell of a day.
Greatest day of my life. Greatest day of my life.
That was.
I got to share it with Charlie Hartley. I got to walk up to him, shake his hand, and congratulate him on an amazing day.
Back to the history, though, and thank you. You're so complimentary. I'm afraid it's not just the history of fishing. They're not teaching history of anything anymore, and it's a shame. I'm sorry, I sound like an old fart, and Matt's laughing at us like, who needs American history?
I'm the one who brought it up.
Well, I know. I'm just using you as an example. But they call baseball the American sport. Daggone it, bass fishing is the American sport. There's no more American sport than bass fishing. And I've been blessed to be in a big block of the history. And there was a big block before me. There's going to be a big block after us. And if someone doesn't write this stuff down, as hokey as it sounds, it'll be lost. It'll be gone. It's just done, over, dust. I mean, no one's going to get into the old books. They're only going to look at the internet and say, how do I do this now? It's a shame. And I think part of the reason we respect it as we get older is we realize we're going to be history and we'd like to be remembered a little too. So someone write this stuff down.
All right, this is case in point right here, guys. And I would have mentioned this. This right here is obviously what I'm holding up there. Wheaties box, Denny Brower on the cover of it. The Breakfast of Champions 1998 FLW Tour Angler of the Year, and you could go into the Denny Brower discussion on that. I do Kurt Dove's Pro Bass Camp every year down at Amistad or up at Oneida, and these are high school kids, right? And every once in a while you'll get one that's a real student of the game. Typically their dad fishes but most of them are the YouTube generation. This is nothing against them. They're passionate anglers that are dedicated to their craft. They fish high school. They want to be professional fishing. They're quitting other sports to fish. But at the one down at Amistad, Denny Brower is there for both episodes, and these kids get to go out and fish on Amistad with Denny Brower for a full day. Now there's also a bunch of other of us around there, one of which is Rick Harris, who guides down there. Well, he's Ruben with the kids, and Rick's won a Toyota series, right? And is a guide down there, and me and a number of other people. Well, a couple, like last year we're down there and they're doing the pairings for the next day, and one of the kids draws Denny Brower and he goes, "Oh man, I wanted to fish with Rick." and there's nothing wrong with it, but it was like timeout, history lesson. Like Rick's an awesome dude to fish with. Yeah, you're gonna have a hell of a time with Rick, but dude, Denny Brower. And they didn't know who Denny Brower was. Now there was a couple other kids that were like, "Dude, it's Denny Brower." But that's what I'm worried about, is that like freaking Denny Brower, man. Like everyone needs to know who that is.
That's recent history, Matt. So imagine this stuff Ken's looking up. I'm afraid that's just what happened. Time goes on, but America is still a very young country. We're only several generations into this country. So let's save it while we can, because I can't believe how quick time goes, how quick a generation gets added to our sport. You know, I don't want to get way off track, but look at all these great young anglers now that are going to be the next, you know, Kevin Van Dam's, the next Jacob Wheeler's, the next, I mean, they're coming on. They're coming on.
Is this true, Kevin? Is this true right now? Sorry, the echo. Got it. Is this true? Are we getting younger? I know you always say, "Hey, we're not getting younger." It's still 38 to 40 years old. Your prime is still in your 40s. How, in the last couple of years, are we now officially getting younger? Is that sliding to younger championships? I just filmed something with Mercer for the bilge deal that we're coming out with, and it's, hey, is someone going to beat Stanley Mitchell's 1981 classic record of 21 years, 5 months?
13 days.
Yeah.
No, well, I need to look at the list of classic qualifiers, but ordinarily there's not anybody in the field who's young enough to break Stanley's record.
Yeah.
But is the field getting younger?
The field is a little bit younger, but that's
because of financial opportunity. We could not afford to fish a Bass Masters or have a boat that could fish a Bass Masters till we were in our 30s. Kids now at 20 years old, I'm not saying they're winning, but they're having the ability to enter a Bass Masters. We couldn't. One or two people fish their first Bass Masters at that age back then, like Zell Rowland or.
Well, but the Elite Series is a little bit younger, guys. The Elite Series is a little bit younger than it was, but that's because of the purge and the defections in 2019. That's not because natural filtration in and out have made it a younger field. It's strictly because of that. The guys who are qualifying for the Classic have gotten just slightly younger. I mean, less than a year younger on average. The average guy who qualifies for a Bassmaster Classic is 40. If you want to go back and see when the sport was at its youngest, it was the mid and early 1970s when the average Classic qualifier was 35. But that's where the range is. The range is pretty small. The sport is not getting particularly younger. High school and college bass programs are not making the sport bigger. They're just not. They're not increasing spending. They're not. And there's a ton of data to show this. Here's how you grow the sport. You go out there and you find a lot of people under 12 years old and you introduce them to the sport. That's where growth comes from. It doesn't come from high school and college. It just doesn't. It comes from 12 and younger, and it always has.
I would be remiss if I didn't bring this up. Actually, my dad is listening to the show, and he took a picture of a book that is on the coffee table at their house in Decatur, Illinois. And he's never fished a bass tournament in his life. He's the one who got me into fishing, took me to Canada, but not a hardcore bass angler. And he sent me this book, and he's like, "Hey, you want to talk about like a history?" He's like, "Why are you not showing that?"
Oh yeah, I've got that, Ken. I've got a copy of that.
If you're listening, that is the Bass Fishing Vault, the Bass Fishing Vault Collector's Edition.
Book to produce, one of the most expensive books to produce, if I recall.
But if you want to kind of know the history of it and how it all came about to where we are up until what year did that come out, Ken?
Wow, this is about 2010, something like that.
Now I know there's a bunch of chapters after it, but the history hasn't changed before that. This book, you can get on and buy it. This is the book that you need. Everyone needs this book. That gives you a great representation of an understanding.
Great Christmas gifts also. Christmas gifts for next year. Go ahead and pre-order.
Another great book on the history of bass fishing is Bass Boss, the biography of Ray Scott, the late great Ray Scott. That's a terrific book by Robert Boyle. That's a wonderful book that'll teach you the history of modern tournament fishing in the sport. Yeah, I love that. Thank you for, there you go, Bass Boss. Thanks for showing that book, Matt, because I wrote part of that book, and Bill Dance wrote the foreword for that book. Bill just recently published his latest book called Fish Tales, and I wrote the foreword for Bill's book. So
awesome. What an honor.
Full circle. Oh, it was an enormous honor.
Yeah.
I said, Charlie, I said to Bill, I said, hey man, why don't you have somebody who can help you sell some books write the foreword for your book? And he said, no, I want you to do it. So that was
what a class act. Bill Dance is a class act, man.
He's a great man. A great man.
All right, Ken, I want to get into this real quick, and then we'll take our final break of the show and come back. I don't know what y'all have going on, because like I said, Charlie runs the company from Florida. Every time when I would stay with him every morning when I was there, he'd be up at 4 a.m. on the computer doing calls, doing all that, then on the water at 8. And I know you, aside from being a world famous podcaster now, you still are with Fish and Tackle Retailer. But I want to get into the actual podcast. You are 6 episodes in now. You talked a lot about it on the show. It is called The Big Bass Podcast. Website is thebigbass.com, available on all iTunes downloads, YouTube, and the site. There's the site right there that you can go through and watch it. But thoughts, expectations so far now that this thing is launched and you are looking to grow it and continue it.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun, and Matt, I have to thank you for being an inspiration to make this thing happen. You and I have talked about my doing something like this for a long time, and I wanted to do something like this for a long time, and I bought a whole bunch of podcasting equipment 3-4 years ago to do it, and several things stopped me. The biggest one was the technical stuff. I knew I couldn't do the technical stuff. But a buddy of mine, Nathan Benson, he's got a degree in digital media. He's way smarter than me. He's able to do the technical stuff. But then I realized, oh my gosh, this is it's so much. It's a lot of work, hours and hours and hours of research go into each one of those episodes. Apart from the fact that I've been studying this stuff for my whole life, hours and hours and hours of research go into each episode. I said, I can't keep up with that pace. And so finally it dawned on me, I've got to bring in Terry Battisti, who is the ultimate historian on our sport and just as eaten up with it as I am. And not only a great guy who's crazy smart, he's got a PhD in chemical engineering, by the way, but a fabulous accountability partner and somebody who I can bounce ideas off, and he'll tell me if I'm an idiot or if it has potential. So back in November, we started recording. And we launched it on January 3rd. I was fortunate enough to be on your show not long before that. And I said, we're launching on January 3rd. And that put extra pressure on us to make that happen. So we actually did make that happen. We launched with 4 episodes on January 3rd. We're putting one out every Tuesday for now until we are dragged off the internet. We're having a great time with it. It's a lot of work. Our goal is to tell great stories about big bass. Our goal is to, if we can become popular and find a big audience, that'd be great. If we can monetize, that'd be great. But right now we're having a good time telling stories about big bass and sharing our passion for the sport. Now, I'm jumping around. Sorry about that. Why big bass? Well, one reason was, I know I can't compete with BTL. I can't do a show with this kind of format nearly as well as Matt Pangrac does it, or nearly as well as Matt and Mark Jeffries did it. So I can't hang with you. I can't do an education show like a Bass U or yours. This is an education show quite often. I can't do that. People don't come to me for that. Maybe they read the articles I write about how to, but they're not expecting me to do how to. So I wanted to find something where I thought it would be interesting. I thought it would be fun, and I wouldn't be competing with my friends. And so I thought, nobody's really telling stories specifically about big bass. And so I thought, this might have some real potential. And when Nathan and Terry agreed with me, I said, okay, I might be onto something here. And thus the Big Bass Podcast, which has been a lot of fun so far.
It's fantastic. So you're going to go through the fake records, the real records, how records come about, controversies, things that are rock solid, interviews. Like, it's going to cover everything that you've ever heard, rumor, story. I mean, you're just scratching the surface so far.
Yeah, exactly. We've covered some big fish. Our next episode is going to be at the record keeping organizations, IGFA, Freshwater Fishing Hall of Fame, the states. We're going to do an episode very soon on Walter Ballonis and the state record largemouth bass out of Massachusetts, which was caught through the ice and weighed 15.5 pounds. We're going to do stories about the frauds. We're going to do a 5-episode story on George Perry's world record. We're going to do a 3-episode series on David Hayes' smallmouth record. We're going to cover Manabu Krita. We're going to cover ones that got away. Bill Dance has an amazing story about what he believes was a world record smallmouth bass that he lost years ago. We're going to cover a world record smallmouth that Billy Westmoreland lost on Christmas Day of 1970. We're into the April Fool's jokes. We're into anything that has to do with big bass. We're there.
This is going to be huge.
We've only got 400 episodes mapped out so far. So.
But listen,
I was worried you'd run out of things to talk about.
Yeah, Charlie, don't worry. Those ideas will outlive me.
Here's the thing that's the beauty of this is it's got every element that attracts people and brings them in, as far as the intrigue, the controversy, the information, and the storytelling and the expertise. I mean, you combine all those 5 things together, and it's a win-win. I mean, even if you're not into motocross and there's like a half-hour story on the guy who did the longest jump, you're going to be like, yeah, I want to know how that guy jumped 250 feet on this motorcycle. And you don't have to know anything about it, but it's the personalities and the stories around it. And then the controversy about, yeah, but he had, this type of blah, 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 and it didn't conform. I mean, there's all sorts of that. And then this guy claims that he jumped 300 yards. But then if you do the count, it doesn't matter that I don't know anything about it. It's the personalities and the story and the way it's presented. So very excited for it, and just wanted to get that out to as many people as possible to start gaining traction, because the more traction it has, the more people listen to it, the more financially valuable it becomes, which means the more that Ken and Terry and Nathan can spend time researching and doing it, because like I said, they all have jobs. As this is a passion project at this time.
It really is. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention we're on YouTube, we're on Stitcher, we're on Apple Podcasts. We're on every podcast platform out there. And, you're absolutely right about when somebody clicks on a show, guys, we don't assume they know anything about the fish. We want to take them right down the rabbit hole with us. And it reminds me a little bit, since you brought it up, Matt, you did a great job of jogging my memory and I guess even how I think about the show. ESPN has this series they call 30 for 30, and they might do one on a women's bowling league. And I promise you, I don't care about women's bowling leagues, but I'll watch just because I'll figure, well, there's got to be a story there, because they're devoting an hour of precious television time and countless thousands of dollars to producing this thing. So yeah. I'm gonna watch
right now, I think that Mark Jeffries is on a recruiting trip to get a female bowler from like Wisconsin to go to SNU for his bowling team. I'm not kidding. He's on a female bowling recruiting trip. Like right now, his sole goal is to get the women's side of his SNU collegiate bowling program up and rolling. It's just funny that you mentioned that.
Matt, is he happy? He seems like he's real happy. Is Mark happy?
Oh, he's elated. Anyway, no story on that. I just thought it was funny you use that example while Mark Jeffries is off, being like, hey, and the weather is nice for 7 days out of the year in Oklahoma.
Hey, I hope Mark hears this, but Mark, as I am a 2-time graduate of the University of Georgia, which just won its second national football championship in a row. And if you're looking for inspiration for these bowlers, you might want to play Kirby Smart's pregame speech.
I hadn't heard it. All right.
No, don't. You don't. It's what is it? NSFW?
Not safe for work.
Right. Yeah, it ain't.
All right, we're going to take our final break. When we come back, Major League Fishing just announced that they're going back to the 5-fish format for the regular season events. I've had this talk with you before, Ken. Where do you put the 4 years of every fish counts into the history books of bass fishing? How do you compare what Edwin did at Redcrest with the hundreds of pounds? How do you compare what Jacob Wheeler has done over the last couple years with all the weights and all that? We just had a discussion about history. I want to get your take on where that stands when we come back for our final segment. Charlie, you don't have anything to do. You're in freaking Florida hanging out in your garage with the fishing boat. I'm just keeping you from catching 7-pounders. That's it. So it is Monday BTL. We will be back with the final segment right after this.
Elite Series Pro Daryl Gleason here. My Pro Guide batteries keep me going on those long tournament days and long practice days. Always plenty of juice, never fail. The best part about Pro Guide batteries, it's the people behind the company. They have over 40 years experience in the battery business, keeping all of us fishermen out on the water longer, catching more fish. Check them out at ProGuideBatteries.com.
What's up, Bass Talk Live fans? Brandon Polnick here. And ever since I won a couple Bassmaster Elite Series events on X-Zone Lures, I've been getting a bunch of questions of what makes them so special and different. And really, the truth is, it's in the details. The little details, things like no cheap fillers in their plastic. That gives you more lifelike action, more realistic and vibrant colors. But don't just take my word for it. Go to www.xzonelures.com and check them out for yourself.
Are you looking to install your own fishing electronics? The solution is the Bass Tank Power Harness. It takes the guesswork out of installation. No more voltage issues or interference. Designed by an engineer so that you can get professional results right there in your own garage. Installation done right with the help of the Bass Tank Power Harness. You can feel confident knowing that your installation was done right. The Bass Tank Power Harness. Give us a call or order yours today at thebasstank.com.
Get the best patterns backed by tournament data. Start by finding the best 10% of your lake. Know exactly what to look for and what to throw. After that, just put them in the boat. Try the Deep Dive app today.
Look at that beast right there.
Combining one of the most popular hook styles with Gamakatsu's beefier Superline offering, the Gamakatsu Superline Offset Round Bend delivers the strength necessary to target big fish in heavy cover. Well suited for braided line and heavier fluorocarbon, the Gamakatsu Superline Offset Round Bend is built using stronger Superline wire that allows anglers to easily fish a finesse worm around heavy cover. The round bend offers a larger bite area, perfect for any worm presentation, while increasing your hookup ratios. The newly enhanced Z-bend holds your plastics on the hook longer, reducing the number of pull-offs and reducing damage to plastics. Available in 2/0, 3/0, 4/0, and 5/0, this is the most durable worm hook, designed for heavier lines that hold your bait on longer.
Preparation is key to success. And that preparation starts well before you ever hit the water. You're only as strong as your connection to the fish, and your line is that critical connection. Confidence in your line every minute of every day on the water is a necessity, and failure, it's not an option. Sunline makes the fluorocarbon, nylon, and braided lines to give you the strength to guarantee your confidence.
Have you considered purchasing new electronics for your rig? The type of mounts you choose to protect your investment should be part of the decision-making process. No matter if you prefer 1, 2, or 3 graphs up front, Beatdown Outdoors has a solution for you. Adjustable, versatile, rigid, and made in the USA. What's your ultimate electronics setup? Check out the full selection of Beatdown Outdoors products by visiting beatdownoutdoors.com. All right, welcome back. Final segment of BTL Bass Talk Live on a Monday with 2 legends in the industry. That would be Charlie Hartley and Ken Duke. And I knew they'd both shake
Just
their
Charlie.
head. That's why I said it, because they're
Just
both
Charlie.
level on it. Dude, Charlie, you led like that. Think about that classic. So like, this is what
I think about
every day,
No,
man.
no,
You're
no.
not going to tell me anything I don't know about that.
This
class.
is what crossed my mind on it. So at Hartwell in the Open, I've had it a couple times where there was nothing else overlapping it. So like Bass Nation Championship final day at Hartwell, I've consciously thought going out that day, this is the biggest bass tournament going on in the world right now. This is what I have dedicated my life to. This is what I love. And I'm one of the 10 guys that is in this. Like, I've got the camera guy right there. And I'm like, I'm like, how did this happen? B, I'm like, this is really cool. And C, both times, instead of being freaked out, I've been like, I need to embrace this moment. Now, I know the killer instinct might be, yeah, of course I'm supposed to be here. I'm going to be here again too. And the only thing the camera's doing is getting in my damn way. And I'm going to go get ready to kick some butt. But there's not many people, and you go back to that 2008 Hartwell Classic that Ken Duke brought up and you thought about it. Dude, you are leading the biggest event in the history of the world and something that you absolutely love to do. And I'm sure Ken could tell you how many different day one or day two, or how many different leaders there have ever been in the Bassmaster Classic, as opposed to the tens of thousands of anglers that have aspired to be there. And dude, you have that feeling. How many is it, Ken? It's obviously less than 100, because there's only been how many classics?
Yeah, we're coming up on classic number 53 here. And I'll tell you this, it's just a handful of guys, and a rookie leading the classic doesn't happen much anymore. Only one rookie has led the classic since Charlie led day one of 2008. Only one rookie has led it since then.
Who was that?
Keith Poche in 2012.
Red River.
Yeah.
Chris Lane's classic.
Exactly. So yeah, what Charlie did to lead the classic on his first day at a Bassmaster Classic is really rare. Boyd Duckett did it, Carl Maxfield, a guy named Jack Wade, Jim
I knew
Bitter,
Carl well. Carl Maxfield was a great guy. God.
Yeah, a handful of guys have done it. And as the classic becomes, as more and more classics are in our rearview mirror, it happens less and less. So what Charlie did is wildly rare.
It's crazy how it's just part of history. Like, oh yeah, the Charlie Hartley classic deal, or
it was Alton Jones's classic.
I know it was Alton's classic. But,
classic
I mean,
very often.
Dude, you can only make a mop jig in 40 foot so exciting. Like, at least with Charlie, you had docks and hook sets and stories.
Matt, it was.
Cool.
I hate the word surreal. But if there's ever a definition of it, when they told me I was leading the classic, 30 years of work and emotion, and there's as happy as Charlie always acts, he does not like not winning. He hates it. So to see that all come together was like, this was all worth it. All that, all night driving. All those scraping my quarters together to get a new prop when I couldn't afford it. All that driving every night on Friday night from Ohio to where the water wasn't frozen to South Carolina to Florida for 2 days of fishing and driving back. I did things that other people wouldn't do. All my fishing buddies would not do what I did. And I thought, daggone it, it was worth it. Look what you've just done.
Mm-hmm.
It was gratifying would be the word. You do all that work, Matt, you do the work. And sometimes it seems like, what am I doing? If I put this much energy to anything else, I'll be a billionaire. And thank God it's not about money. It's the passion. And to be standing on a stage leading the classic couldn't even believe it, Matt. Could not even believe it.
Fortunately, Charlie, you did put that passion towards something else in a business, and now you're able to live in Florida.
I promise it doesn't
put that work in. So let me ask Ken this, because Ken, have you ever been like, I want to become a professional bass angler? Or have you all, like, has that ever been in, I don't think I've ever asked you that. Was that ever originally part of your dream or goal when you got into this?
Yeah, it was. When I was in high school, that was my dream. I wanted to be Bill Dance, Roland Martin, Rick Clunn, Dave Glebe. I wanted to be that guy. But I grew up in an extremely rural part of South Carolina. I went to the same high school as Davey Height, for example. I went to high school with Davey Height's wife.
No way.
Yeah, we were classmates. We were voted most intelligent boy and girl in our class. She's proved that's correct. I haven't.
You and Davey Height's wife are in the yearbook
Natalie.
together, voted as most intelligent of the class.
Yeah. It's a small world, Matt Pangrak. It's a small world. So yeah, and I wanted it, but I didn't know how to do it. I had no frame of reference. Nobody in my area had done it. And so I kept the passion for fishing and for the history of the sport and for reading about it and doing it, but I didn't know how to accomplish what guys like Charlie and Davey ultimately did. So I went in a different direction and that has ultimately led me here.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was a dream of mine for a while when I was a kid.
Okay.
One quick question, Ken. I know we've gone too long.
No, we haven't.
Mercer always brags about how many people have been to one classic. Do you know offhand what happens when you go to 2 or 3 or 4? Do the numbers shrink drastically?
The numbers absolutely shrink drastically, but here's what's kind of weird. The average angler who has ever qualified for a classic, Charlie, you're not going to like that.
For more than one.
Has qualified for a little more than 3.
Gotcha.
So you got work to do.
I've only got 2, and I got 3 in me this year. You watch.
No doubt. But yeah, it drops, but maybe not as much as you think. It's an interesting sport, and I've often believed that qualifying for one classic is great, but I've often thought that qualifying for your second classic is tougher. Because you pick up sponsors, you get more notoriety, you're signing more autographs, you're dealing with more of the business aspects of the game, and it can take your eye off the ball a little bit. So I think sometimes the second one is a tougher one.
Matt, you're always the interviewer. How's your life going, and what are your plans for this year so that you qualify for the elites? What steps are you taking in the off season to make sure you're going to kick my ass and qualify for the elites?
Biggest thing is I need to go into every tournament feeling prepared, and I haven't done that in the past. So when you go back to back and then you're trying to do the studio and stuff, inevitably there's a couple derbies where you go, I'm going to figure it out when I get there. and there's nothing wrong with that. And sometimes you can figure it out, but the ones that I may have made a concerted effort to in the past 3 years, I've noticed where I go in with a game plan, even if it doesn't work out, but the ones where you feel more prepared when you get on the water are inevitably better. And if you're going to dedicate that much, you have to do that. Okay, Ken, let me ask you.
If you need any help with the shows while we're on the road, let me know.
Oh yeah, you'll be in. I'll be in contact or doing some live shows. 2 things, then we'll get going. 1 or 2. So Ken, you're looking at this from a different perspective. Charlie and I currently fishing. You have fish tournaments, you know what's going on. But do you feel like that leading the classic moment, the holy cow, I'm in the top 10 moment, it's all worth it, the idling out? Is that a realization of hard work, or is that the next shot of the addiction of the drug that keeps you doing it from an outsider's perspective looking in? Is that would a lot of guys be better off if they've never had that one moment and then they're trying to chase that high for the next 30 years? Or is that, you see what I'm saying? Because there's a lot of money, time, and strife.
Better off? What do you mean by better off?
I catch him in the fall. I really do. Look it back. I catch him in the fall. My moments come in September and October. That's a lot of sucking in January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, where I'm going, what in the hell am I doing? And then you have that one moment and you're like, is that the curse or the blessing from an outsider's perspective?
Both.
Yeah, it's both. And I would say financially it's a curse, because a lot of guys who have that shot of career adrenaline with that first classic appearance, especially the guys who have an incredible dream-worthy first day like Charlie or Keith Poche, they have a story to tell for the rest of their lives, and you can see they relish telling that story. That becomes a crucible for them. They go through that and they have this amazing story to tell the rest of their lives. For some guys, going to that first classic and getting a little taste of success there is the doorway to losing a lot of money. It really is. But on the whole, I'd say it's obviously a positive. And you can't. Every time I'm around Charlie, every time I'm around Keith, I love talking about their first day of a Bassmaster Classic, because they light up when they tell that story. Maybe in both cases, it didn't work out quite the way they hoped, but they talk. What's weird is they talk about it in the same ways. It was surreal. I didn't even know I was leading until backstage somebody told me I was leading, and then it hit me. And it's just really cool to hear them talk about it. When you guys were talking earlier, Matt, you were talking about launching on Hartwell and you're in the top 10. And I think how often can we say that we're in exactly the place on exactly the day at exactly the moment where we want to be? I think athletes have that experience more than anybody else. And professional anglers are, in that sense, athletes. You guys have had that experience. Not a lot of people get that. So that's the drug. It's a drug. And as I like to say, the poison is the cure.
I tell my co-anglers every morning when they play the Star Spangled Banner, I say, how many people are exactly where they want to be this morning? If they could be anywhere in the world, I'd be right here. And there's not millions of people that get to say that as many mornings as we do. It's priceless. It's a priceless feeling. I'll never take it for granted. I have fished 400 and some professional tournaments, and the morning I couldn't stand it, I entered the Toyota at Harris because I couldn't wait till Eufaula. And that morning I'll say, I'm right where I'm supposed to be this morning. Yeah. Even if it's snowing and the fish aren't biting, I don't care.
As a media guy, I don't have that feeling on the same level. But when I go to the Bassmaster Classic, I'm having a blast. That's the place I want to be. I'm hanging out with the people I want to hang out with. I'm seeing Charlie Hartley or Matt Pangrack. I'm seeing guys in the tournament, guys who haven't fished the tournament in decades, but I'm still loving it. But one thing I say to everybody who's qualified for his first Classic, I say the same thing to everybody. I say, don't forget to win. Because so many guys are just happy to be there. So I always say, hey, don't forget to win. And Matt, I used to do this at every Classic when I was working for BASS. I'd walk up to the rookies at the Classic and I would ask them, I said, well, what's going to be a good Classic for you? Do you need to fish on Sunday? Do you qualify for the top 25? Do you need to be top 10? Are you happy to be here? Nobody who did well ever told me anything other than I am here to win.
Yeah,
I'm here to win. Anything other than a win is no good.
George Cochran called me. Yeah, George Cochran called me the night before my first Classic, and he said, one of my peers, one of the greatest men I know, he personally called me and said, "Don't forget there's a Derby tomorrow, because that Classic gets your head spinning so bad you forget there's a Derby in the morning."
Yeah, it can get you because it takes you out of your prep. And Matt, as you're going to fish a Classic one of these days, hopefully multiple Classics, and you've been to enough media experiences that Classic to know that whatever your routine is in preparing for a tournament, the Classic takes you out of it. And the guys who adapt best often do the best. And I want to add one last story. I apologize for going on about this, but for many years I would see Aaron Martins, our great friend Aaron Martins, at the Classic because he fished 15 of them, I believe, and he came close many times, 4 second-place finishes. And I used to walk up to Aaron at every Classic and I'd say, "Who's the only guy here who can beat Aaron Martins?" And Aaron would smile and say, "Aaron Martins." And I think a lot of guys doesn't register with them, but it's so true. Who's the only guy who could beat Aaron Martins? It was Aaron. Who's the only guy who can beat anybody in the field? It's
yourself. Yeah, absolutely.
That's really good. I don't even want to get into the other topic because, like I said, you're going to be a regular on the show. We'll get into that. But I'll leave it with, it is interesting at the Classic to see. It's more so than any other tournament. I think you have some of the agony of defeat there. In some of the past, a lost fish that'll haunt you, but you also see a lot of people, not a lot, but you also see, I think, more in other tournaments, guys who are at peace with the fact that they didn't win the tournament because they went out, they did what they had to do. They got beat. They were in the hunt and it just wasn't their time. And it's interesting. You talk to a lot of those guys and they're like, man, I did what I needed, what I wanted, what I thought I needed to do. And it was just someone else's time. And they're truly at peace with that. Would you agree with that?
I'm not at peace with it at all.
No.
I think everybody who came up short is still second guessing himself. Now, sometimes you don't second guess yourself. I like when Kevin Van Dam won the 2011 Classic by 11 pounds or whatever the margin was.
Polinick's first Classic.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's kicking themselves on that one. Kevin just went out and put a beat down on everybody. But when you lose because you didn't catch a fish one day, you came in one short of a limit one day. When you lose because
you're not adjusting to the situation, not adjusting to the weather change, when you think you could have made a conscious decision to make it better and you didn't. Yeah.
I know Charlie has regrets about day 3 of that Classic and how he approached it. And we won't go into that, but yeah, Charlie's, a lot of these guys second guess themselves. And I get it. I get it.
All right. That's fair. Anything else you guys want to get in? I typically do a segment by myself. You guys have been fantastic guests. Charlie, Ken, I greatly appreciate it. I'm just going to leave you guys up on the screen as we exit. So parting words.
I have to go run my SignCom production, virtual production meeting, which I postponed to 11 o'clock. But I do want to say, I do want to say, Ken, it's an honor to be on the show with you. Anytime you want to do it again, I'll be happy to, and I'll watch all of your Big Bass podcasts. And everyone go fishing and have a great 2023. No matter what's going on politically, this country is still the greatest country in the world, and we can fish every day. They don't get to do that everywhere. So count your blessings. God bless America.
Thanks, Charlie. Go in your meeting. I'll kick you out right now. You're 6 minutes late.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Charlie. Take care, brother.
Ken, thank you very much. Big Bass Podcast. Matt. How often are they coming out?
Every Tuesday, we've got a new episode dropping, so you'll see a new one tomorrow.
What's that one on?
It's on the record-keeping organizations like IGFA.
Oh, you mentioned that,
Fishing Hall of Fame, yeah.
You're going to tick some people off in this because, I mean, you're an opinionated guy, and I think there's some people that are hanging their hat on some things that you might, I don't want to say debunk, but might cast a shadow of doubt over some long-held, just established things. Is that a fair tease moving forward?
Matt, if we cannot afflict the comfortable and comfort the afflicted, I don't know what we're going to do.
This has been another edition of BTL Bass Talk Live. Ken Duke, Charlie Hartley. Tomorrow, folks, if you listen to the show with Fred Kantawi, we discovered that Brett Hite ran the Ammonium AD boat as an FLW team deal. I was intrigued with this. It was very hard to find that picture. It was actually in an article. I found the picture. I have since made contact with Brett Hite. And Brett Hite's going to be on to talk about that Ammonium AD Chewables team deal tomorrow. And then Justin Lucas on Wednesday, followed by day 4 with the man Frank Scalish on Thursday. Ken Duke, thank you very much. I'll talk to you later. Thanks, guys. See ya.